My name is Alejandra. I'm 34 years old, and right now I'm sitting in family court, watching my husband, after 8 years of marriage, laugh while he signs the divorce papers. Mauricio always thought I was just his trophy wife, with no goals of my own. What he never imagined is that while he was cheating on me with his coworker, I was secretly building an empire right under his nose. The judge is about to read my financial statement, and I can't wait to see that arrogant smile disappear from his face. But before I tell you how that look of pride completely collapsed, let me know where you're watching me from. And don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you've ever had to defend yourself when nobody thought you could. I was just a small-town girl from Jalisco who moved to Mexico City to study at the university. I had big dreams and a backpack full of hope. I studied graphic design and was determined to make a place for myself in the big city. Even though I came from humble beginnings, my parents always taught me the value of hard work and saving money. Those lessons would help me later in ways I never expected. I met Mauricio at a charity dinner for a children's hospital. I was there because I had volunteered to design their promotional materials. He was there, as I later found out, only because it was good for his image. Mauricio came from a wealthy, traditional family. He worked as an investment banker and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. "You don't look like you're from here," were the first words he said to me. Now I understand it was both an insult and a preview of what our relationship would become. But back then, his charming smile and the attention he gave me made me ignore that red flag. Our romance was a whirlwind. Mauricio took me to restaurants where the menus didn't even have prices, on weekend trips to New York just because, and into a lifestyle I had only seen in movies. He seemed perfect, attentive, successful, and apparently in love with me, despite my modest background. At that time, I was earning a small salary as a junior graphic designer at a marketing agency. I loved my work, the creative challenges, the joy of seeing my designs out in the real world. But to Mauricio, that was just my little job. Mauricio often suggested that I didn't need to work. "Why tire yourself out for pennies when I can give you everything?" he would say, never understanding that for me. My career was more than money. It was my identity, my independence. 6 months after we met, he proposed in an elegant restaurant overlooking the city skyline. The ring was enormous, the champagne ridiculously expensive, and the moment so carefully staged that other diners even applauded. It felt like a fairy tale. I said yes, without a second thought. The wedding was small but elegant, just how I wanted it. His family, the Shannons, had pressured us for a big, flashy celebration with hundreds of guests, but I stood my ground. Looking back, that was one of the few times I truly held my own against their expectations. "A modest wedding for a modest girl," his mother, Elvira, said with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. That was the first time I clearly felt how his family saw me, like I wasn't good enough for their son. After our honeymoon in the Maldives, we moved into Mauricio's luxury apartment in Polanco. Everything was minimalist, expensive, and cold, just like his family. I tried to make it warmer, adding photos, colorful paintings, little personal details. But Mauricio preferred the sober, impersonal style that showed wealth more than personality. The first signs of conflict appeared quickly. He questioned every decorating choice I made, criticized my friends, and made subtle but cutting remarks about my career. "Graphic design is so overdone," he once said after meeting my coworkers. "You could be exceptional, but you're wasting your talent making little logos for companies no one knows." I tried to fit into his social circle. The wives of bankers, businessmen, women who spent their days between malls, spas, and charity events. They were polite on the surface, but they never really accepted me. Once, during a dinner, I overheard one of them say, "She's Mauricio's experiment with the middle class." When I told him about it, he didn't defend me. He only suggested I should try harder to fit in, update my wardrobe, maybe take tennis lessons. "They just need to see that you're adapting to our lifestyle," Mauricio would say, as if my identity was a project he could redesign however he wanted. The first years of our marriage were a confusing mix of luxury and loneliness. He spoiled me with expensive gifts, while my self-esteem slowly crumbled. I was turning into what he wanted, a trophy wife who looked good by his side, while the creative, independent woman I once was started to fade away. By our second year of marriage, the tension that had been building finally began to spill over. Mauricio had always been meticulous with money, but his attitude turned increasingly controlling. Even though we shared bank accounts, he questioned every purchase I made, while he spent freely without ever asking me, "Did you really need another set of art supplies?" He'd say, looking at the bank statements. "That's $200 you could have invested." Yet he had no problem spending thousands on watches or golf clubs. Little by little, I became isolated from my friends and family. Trips to visit my parents in Jalisco grew rare. Mauricio always had an excuse. A business dinner, an important event, or simply, Guadalajara is too provincial for you. My college friends eventually stopped calling. Mauricio had made it clear they weren't sophisticated enough to step into his house. Your friend Letitia asked if our wine was Mexican. He mocked after a dinner I had organized. As if we'd ever serve national wine. It's embarrassing, Alejandra. My career, which had once been a source of pride, became a constant struggle. When I was offered a promotion to senior designer, Mauricio didn't celebrate. "Is that tiny salary increase really worth more hours away from home?" he asked. "Remember, soon we'll want to start a family." That was new, because every time I had brought up having kids before, he always said it wasn't the right time. It was around then that I discovered my true passion, digital marketing. The agency where I worked had started expanding into new services, and I volunteered to learn analytics and strategy. I had a natural talent for understanding consumer behavior and building effective campaigns. Excited about this new direction, I told Mauricio about my dream of one day having my own boutique digital marketing firm. His response was crushing. "Be realistic, Alejandra. Starting a business takes real business sense, and that's not exactly your strength. Besides, most businesses fail in the first year." That moment showed how different we really were when it came to money. For him, everything was about appearances, the right address, the right car, the right vacations. For me, coming from a middle-class background, money was about saving, investing smart, and valuing what was useful, not flashy. As our third anniversary approached, Mauricio's late nights at the office became routine. There was always some excuse, an important client, market volatility, quarterly reports. Whatever the reason, the reality was the same. I ate dinner alone, slept alone, and lived like a single woman, only with the financial control of a demanding husband. Our first truly serious fight happened after his family's annual Christmas dinner. In the car, his mother asked me directly when we were going to give her grandchildren. I said I was ready whenever he was. Mauricio smoothly changed the subject. When we got home, I confronted him. His reaction was cold. "Having kids is a huge responsibility and expense," he said, loosening his tie. "With your modest career and my family's expectations, any child of ours would need trust funds, private schools, the right connections. We're not financially ready yet." "Not financially ready?" I asked, confused. "Mauricio, you earn more than $1 million a year. Your family has generational wealth. What are we waiting for?" His answer revealed everything. "My money isn't the problem. You haven't established yourself properly. What could you possibly contribute to our child's future?" His words burned like acid. For weeks, his contempt toward my work ate at me. In another argument, he even called my salary a joke. That was when I realized I needed financial independence, not just for myself, but for my sanity. That same week, I opened a bank account at a different bank. I arranged for a small part of my paycheck to be deposited there, not enough for him to notice if he checked our joint accounts, but enough to start building something of my own. At the same time, I began teaching myself about personal finance. I read books on investing, took free online courses on business management, and subscribed to newsletters about entrepreneurship. I did everything in secret. I couldn't leave a single digital trace that Mauricio might find. The woman who once fell for fancy dinners and grand gestures was finally waking up, slowly mapping out her escape one step at a time. While Mauricio kept busy with business trips and client dinners, I was quietly laying the foundation for my independence. With my growing savings, I registered a small company, Alejandra Guzman Digital Solutions. I built a professional website to showcase my portfolio and services. My first challenge was finding time to work without Mauricio noticing. I turned the guest room, almost never used, into an office. I told him it was just for a bit of freelance work, a way to contribute extra money to the house. He barely paid attention. To him, it was just a hobby. As long as it doesn't interfere with our social commitments, he warned, dismissing it completely. My first client came by chance in a neighborhood cafe. I overheard Sofia Alvarez, who owned a small traditional bakery, complaining about how expensive marketing agencies were. I can't afford 5,000 pesos for a campaign, but the chain bakeries are killing me, she told the barista. I walked over, introduced myself, shared my experience, and offered to help her for a fraction of the cost, on the condition that I could use her project for my portfolio. Sofia agreed, and the results were incredible. Her social media engagement grew by 300%, and a well-planned email campaign brought her new catering contracts with local companies. The before and after was so clear that Sofia started recommending me to other small business owners. She also became a real friend, something I hadn't felt in a long time. She was genuine, hardworking, and valued my skills in a way Mauricio never had. "You have a gift, Ale," she told me one afternoon. "You understand what makes a business unique and how to communicate that to customers." I worked late at night when Mauricio wasn't home. I even turned our walk-in closet into a tiny studio for client calls, lining the walls with my old college blankets for soundproofing. Every new client brought a mix of excitement and fear. Excitement because the business was growing. Fear because if Mauricio ever found out, there would be a confrontation. I made mistakes. I charged too little for complex projects. I promised deadlines that overwhelmed me. But I learned. Every client taught me something about business, about setting boundaries and valuing my work. I reinvested my earnings in the essentials: software, equipment, licenses. Sometimes I hid the expenses under household costs, other times I paid in cash. Within a year, my client list grew thanks to word of mouth. Instead of spending my profits, I reinvested them into the business and also started saving for future opportunities. Mauricio still had no idea. He thought my new confidence came from finally adapting to his world, not from professional fulfillment. The turning point came when I worked with a local jewelry designer. Her sales skyrocketed after a campaign I created for her, and her story was even published in an entrepreneur magazine. I had to decline being mentioned by name, using privacy as the excuse, but the success gave me credibility with bigger clients. Through Sofia, I met Natalia Kim, a tech entrepreneur who had sold her first startup for millions and was launching a new project. At first, she hired me for something small, but soon she became a regular client and eventually a mentor. "You're charging way too little for what you do," she told me one afternoon as she looked over my rate sheet. "Triple your prices and you'll see how people start valuing your work." She was right. When I raised my rates, instead of losing clients, I began attracting more established businesses willing to pay for quality. Natalia also introduced me to the world of investing beyond savings accounts. "Idle money loses value," she explained. "You have to put it to work." Under her guidance, I started making small investments in emerging tech companies, including Natalia's new startup focused on AI solutions for small businesses. I began with small amounts, but as my company grew, so did my portfolio. Watching both my business and my investments flourish was intoxicating. For the first time since meeting Mauricio, I felt truly alive, with purpose, with independence. I was building something valuable with my own merit. During that time, I kept the facade of being nothing more than Mauricio's wife. At social events, I smiled politely while the wives of his colleagues talked about shopping or charity committees. I went to his business dinners, playing the role of the perfect wife. But inside, I was running a growing company and making financial decisions that would transform my future. Living that double life was exhausting, but it was also empowering. Every new client, every successful campaign, every smart investment was another step toward the freedom I now knew I needed. By the time we had been married for 5 years, the mask of our marriage started to crack. It began with a message that popped up on Mauricio's phone while he was in the shower. On the screen, I saw a preview from someone saved as V. I already miss you. Last night was. The rest disappeared before I could read it, but the suspicion had already taken root. Mauricio had become more distant than usual, and it wasn't uncommon for him to come home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. He always claimed it was from hugging clients goodbye. Instead of confronting him right away, I decided to watch. I studied his patterns, late-night meetings every Thursday, supposed weekend conferences I could never find online, client dinners always at the same expensive restaurant. The following Thursday, I told him I was helping Sophia with a special event at her bakery. In reality, I parked near the restaurant he always went to. At 8:30, his BMW pulled up. 10 minutes later, a silver Audi arrived, and out stepped a woman with long dark hair. Even from a distance, I recognized her, Vanessa Paredes, his colleague at the firm. I watched them hug in a way that left no doubt. This wasn't professional. She kissed him before they went inside. My hands shook as I took photos with my phone. A knot of rage and certainty twisted in my stomach. I waited half an hour before going in. They were sitting in the corner, his hand resting over hers, leaning toward each other in an intimate way. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure they could hear it as I walked over. "So this is what those late meetings are about," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Mauricio jumped, his face shifting from surprise to guilt to annoyance at being caught. Vanessa at least had the decency to blush and excuse herself to the bathroom. "Alejandra, this isn't what it looks like," Mauricio began, using the same fake salesman tone he reserved for difficult clients. "Oh no, Mauricio," I said. "It looks like you're having dinner with your lover while your wife thinks you're working." The conversation felt unreal. Mauricio gave me a half-hearted apology, said it was just something physical, and even had the nerve to blame me for his cheating. "You've become obsessed with your little freelance projects," he whispered, noticing other diners were starting to watch. "You've gotten boring, Alejandra. No ambition. When was the last time you made an effort for our marriage?" I left the restaurant alone. I drove around for hours with no destination before finally going back to the apartment. Mauricio showed up after midnight, full of promises. He'd end things with Vanessa, go to therapy, take me on a second honeymoon. And for reasons I couldn't explain even to myself, I pretended to consider it. "I need time," I told him. And I wasn't lying. I needed time, not to forgive him, but to plan my next steps. The following weeks were a dance of mutual lies. Mauricio suddenly became attentive. Flowers, dinners, little gestures. Meanwhile, I used my meetings with clients to consult divorce lawyers. One of them, Teresa Vargas, recommended by Natalia, was a force of nature. She explained my reality clearly. In Mexico, property division depends on the marriage regime. Without a prenuptial agreement, everything acquired during the marriage is considered joint property. I learned about the complications of divorcing someone with family wealth, the importance of documenting everything, and the need to move wisely. "Knowledge is power, Alejandra," Teresa told me, especially in a divorce. My careful investigation came to a sudden stop when Mauricio found my search history on our shared computer. I had forgotten to use incognito mode when I looked up financial discovery process and divorce. His reaction was immediate and terrifying. He cornered me in the kitchen, waving his phone with a screenshot. "So this is what you've been doing? Planning to divorce me and steal my money." His face was red, a vein bulging in his forehead. "Let me tell you something, Alejandra," he snarled. "Without me, you are nothing. Nothing. My family's lawyers will make sure of that." I stayed calm, which only made him angrier. "I'm not planning anything, Mauricio. I was just researching after everything that happened. Wouldn't you do the same?" He seemed to calm down at my answer, but the threat lingered in the air. That night, I moved all my important documents to a secure cloud and began transferring digital files onto USB drives, which I locked in a safe deposit box at the bank. Mauricio had no idea. The final blow came 3 weeks later. While organizing our closet, a chore he never bothered with, I found a small jewelry box hidden inside a pair of winter boots. Inside was a receipt from Tiffany's for a diamond bracelet, dated 2 months earlier. I had never received such a gift. I already knew about the affair, but holding proof of his emotional investment in another woman hit me harder than I expected. The receipt showed a purchase of nearly 300,000 pesos, money that legally belonged to both of us. Before I could even process this betrayal, I heard the front door open. Voices, laughter, Mauricio and a woman. I froze inside the closet. They walked into the bedroom, clearly not expecting me to be home in the middle of the afternoon. I stepped out and found them in each other's arms at the foot of the bed we had shared for 5 years. Alejandra, Mauricio exclaimed, not even pulling away from Vanessa. You're supposed to be at work. I took the day off, I replied, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. Looks like I should have called first. What followed wasn't a dramatic movie scene. Mauricio was cold and pragmatic. Well, this saves us from an awkward conversation, he said, straightening his tie. I want a divorce, Alejandra. Vanessa and I have plans for the future. He spoke with complete confidence, as if he were in control. He generously offered to let me keep my personal belongings and a small fund to start over. The apartment, the investments, even the artwork we had chosen together, all of it would go to him. My lawyers will contact you, he added, confused when he saw I wasn't crying or begging. You should start looking for another place tonight. Actually, I answered, since this is still legally my residence, I'll be staying. You two can find a hotel. His face hardened. Vanessa tugged on his arm. Come on, Mauricio. We'll deal with this later. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. You'll regret not taking my offer. Once my family's lawyers are done with you, you'll be lucky to afford a tiny room in Iztapalapa. I closed the door behind them, leaned against it, and for the first time since discovering his affair, I smiled. Mauricio had no idea what was coming. The next day, he came by to take most of his clothes and personal things from the apartment. That same afternoon, I changed the locks. Maybe not entirely legal, but I needed time to document all the assets before he tried to take more. His assumption that I was financially clueless showed clearly in his first settlement offer, a lump sum of $5,000 and 6 months of expenses. In exchange, I would give up any claim to the apartment I had furnished and to our joint investments. He's testing the waters, Teresa said when she saw the offer. He thinks you don't know your rights or the true value of the marital assets. With her guidance, I rejected the offer and we started the financial discovery process, a legal step that forces both sides to reveal all their assets and debts. Mauricio's response was to block everything. Delays, vague answers, incomplete reports. It's a common tactic, Teresa reassured me. They want to wear you down, make you spend money, and push you into giving up. What Mauricio didn't know was that I had been keeping records for years, every account, every transaction, even the ones he thought were hidden. And more importantly, I had my own resources, and they were significant. After reviewing everything with Teresa, we decided to temporarily keep the real value of my business and investments hidden during the first phases of the trial. Legally, businesses started during a marriage can be considered shared assets. But Teresa found a possible exception. Mauricio had actively discouraged my project and never contributed a single peso to building it. We'll reveal everything at the right moment, she assured me. For now, let him keep believing his own story about you. While the legal process moved slowly, Mauricio launched his own social campaign. Friends we had in common stopped answering my calls. Invitations disappeared. Even the building's doorman, who had always been kind to me, started treating me with cold indifference. Later, I found out Mauricio was spreading lies, that I had cheated on him, that I was emotionally unstable, and that he had been the one trying to save the marriage. In circles where his last name carried weight, people believed him, without hesitation. That social exile hurt more than I expected. People I had shared dinners, parties, and secrets with disappeared from my life, without even listening to my side. All except Sofia and Natalia, who stayed loyal. Anyone who believes gossip without hearing both sides doesn't deserve your energy, Sophia told me one night while we ate cupcakes in the kitchen of her bakery. Focus on building your new life, not mourning the old one. Mauricio's attempts to intimidate me only grew stronger once he realized I wasn't going to accept his generous offer so easily. He started calling me at night, throwing out veiled threats. "I'll make sure you never work in this city again," he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. He even hinted he'd report my business to the tax office for supposed irregularities, but I had nothing to fear. My finances were meticulously documented. Then his family joined in. His mother, Elvira, called me with that same condescending tone she had always mastered. "We always knew you weren't right for Mauricio," she said bluntly. "But we accepted you because he chose you. Don't make this harder. Take what's offered and leave with dignity." I kept my composure, a skill I had perfected at all those family events where they looked down on me. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Elvira," I replied calmly. "But I'll follow my lawyer's advice." Mauricio's arrogance eventually turned against him. Believing I didn't have the resources for a long legal fight, he made serious mistakes. He failed to declare accounts in the Cayman Islands, accounts I had proof of. He underestimated the true value of his investment portfolio. He even claimed that certain family jewels were his separate property when, in reality, they had been gifted to us both as a couple. Teresa documented each lie with surgical precision, building a case that would destroy his credibility in court. Meanwhile, my business was exploding with growth during the separation. A campaign I created for a regional restaurant chain went viral, featured in industry magazines. I had to turn down interviews, citing personal reasons, but the professional recognition brought me a wave of new clients. The big break came when I signed a contract with a national clothing retailer to redesign their entire digital strategy. A six-figure deal that turned my company from successful into exceptional. I hired 3 employees, rented a small office, and even started turning away clients whose values didn't align with my firm's. All this was happening while Mauricio and his lawyers continued to describe me in court papers as just a freelance designer with unstable income, totally dependent on his support. His perception of me, as the small-town girl dazzled by his money, was so ingrained that he simply couldn't imagine my success without him. The night before the final hearing, I sat alone in the apartment that, despite everything, had never felt like mine. I thought about who I was when I first arrived in this city, who I had become along the way, and who I was now. 5 years earlier, I would have done anything to please Mauricio. But his betrayal, painful as it was, had forced me to reclaim my strength, my ambition, and my dignity. I packed my small suitcase. No matter what the judge decided, I wasn't going to spend another night in the place where my marriage had fallen apart. My new apartment in Santa Fe was ready. I had bought it through a limited liability company Mauricio knew nothing about. I furnished it myself with pieces I chose for their beauty and warmth, not for how they looked in design magazines. As I closed my suitcase, a message lit up my phone. It was from Natalia. "Remember who you are tomorrow, not who he tried to make you be." I held on to those words as I prepared to face the final act of my marriage to Mauricio Santos. The morning of the hearing was clear and fresh. I dressed in a navy blue suit, simple but strong. I wore only one piece of jewelry, a small diamond pendant that Sophia and Natalia had given me for the first anniversary of my company. "Your Independence Diamond," they had called it. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, just as Teresa had advised. Mauricio was already there, flawless in a dark gray tailored suit. At his side stood his lawyer, Lorenzo Bravo, one of the city's most powerful attorneys, famous for always securing outcomes that favored his wealthy clients. Mauricio smiled when he saw me and leaned over to whisper something to Lorenzo. They both laughed. His confidence was so strong it was as if he believed this was nothing more than a formality before his inevitable victory. Teresa walked in moments later, wearing a deep burgundy suit that stood out against the gray walls of the building. Unlike Lorenzo and his team of assistants, she worked alone. Yet she carried the quiet, steady confidence that had won me over from the very first meeting. "Ready?" she asked, her expression calm and unreadable in front of the onlookers. "More than ready," I answered. The courtroom of Judge Magdalena Torres felt solemn and imposing. The judge, a woman in her 60s with dark hair streaked with silver and sharp eyes, was known for her strict sense of justice and zero tolerance for theatrics. When the hearing began, Mauricio delivered a performance worthy of an award. He painted himself as the devoted husband who had supported his wife's modest career, only to be repaid with ingratitude and unreasonable demands. "I only want a fair resolution, Your Honor," he said, his voice carefully measured, radiating disappointment that sounded almost noble. "I offered Mrs. Guzman a generous settlement that would allow her to maintain a comfortable lifestyle while rebuilding her career." Lorenzo took over, arguing that Mauricio's fortune was separate property. He downplayed my contributions and claimed that the apartment, paid for mostly with his income, should belong exclusively to him. Through it all, I remained composed. Not a single reaction, not a single tear. The judge watched me now and then, her expression giving nothing away. Finally, it was time to sign the divorce decree, officially ending our marriage while the financial matters were still pending. Mauricio signed with exaggerated elegance, let out a short laugh, and slipped his Montblanc pen back into his pocket, wearing an air of triumph. When he returned to his seat, Mauricio leaned close and whispered, "Enjoy going back to your parents' little room." Teresa began her presentation calmly, without theatrics, the complete opposite of Lorenzo's showy arguments. She laid out Mauricio's financial lies during the marriage, hidden accounts, expensive gifts to Vanessa, and his constant pattern of economic control. "Your Honor," Teresa said firmly, "Mr. Santos has not fully disclosed the marital assets as the law requires in this state." She presented documents with dates, account numbers, and approximate balances. Mauricio shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The confident smile on his face faded with every page Teresa handed over. Lorenzo quickly asked for a recess. The judge shook her head. "I prefer to continue, Counselor. I'm especially interested in these undeclared assets." The tension in the room grew heavy. Teresa kept going with surgical precision, tearing apart Mauricio's omissions piece by piece. The judge's frown deepened as she studied the evidence. "And furthermore," Teresa continued, "we request that the court recognize Mrs. Guzman's independent assets, established during the marriage, without any contribution from Mr. Santos." This was the moment we had prepared for so carefully. "Explain, Counselor," Judge Torres said, peering over her glasses. "Mrs. Guzman founded a digital marketing company during the marriage. Mr. Santos not only failed to contribute, he actively belittled her work, as shown in these messages." Teresa handed over emails and texts where Mauricio mocked my business, calling it a little game, a hobby, and laughing at my ambitions. For the first time, the judge addressed me directly. "Mrs. Guzman, have you submitted complete financial records of this company to the court?" "Not yet, Your Honor," I said, "but I have them ready to deliver today." Teresa handed the clerk a sealed envelope containing my full financial declaration, which we had carefully held back until this exact moment. "I ask that the court review this before making any decision about asset division," Teresa added. The judge nodded, opened the envelope, and began reading. Silence filled the courtroom. The only sign of her surprise was a slight lift of her eyebrows. After what felt like endless minutes, she raised her gaze. "For the record, I will read the summary of Mrs. Guzman's assets." My heart pounded like a drum. Alejandra Guzman Digital Solutions, founded 3 years ago. Current estimated value, based on revenue and contracts, $2,200,000. Mauricio's head snapped up instantly. His look of disbelief was almost comical. Investment portfolio, including tech stocks and startup shares, $800,000. Mauricio clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. Real estate, an apartment purchased 3 months ago, valued at $150,000. His face collapsed, pale and stiff. Total assets, $2,695,000, the judge concluded. The courtroom fell silent. Mauricio stared at me as if I were a complete stranger, and in a way, I was. For the first time, I felt relief. Not pride, not revenge, just the calm satisfaction of seeing the truth finally come out. "Mr. Santos," the judge asked, Would you like to change any of your previous statements about your wife's financial dependence? Mauricio stayed silent. Lorenzo quickly stood. Your Honor, we had no knowledge of these assets. Since they were generated during the marriage, Mr. Santos is entitled to an equitable share. Teresa smiled confidently. I refer the court to paragraph 23 of the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties. That was our ace up the sleeve. Years ago, while reviewing the prenup, Teresa had noticed a clause Mauricio's own lawyers had inserted. It stated that any business founded by one spouse during the marriage, without investment from the other, would remain the exclusive property of the founder in the event of divorce. The clause that was meant to protect Mr. Santos, Teresa explained, also protects Mrs. Guzman, whose company was built without any participation or support from him. The judge read through the document carefully. The language is clear, she finally said. Continue, counselor. Teresa then presented proof that I had created the business from scratch with my own savings, reinvesting profits year after year. She also submitted statements from clients like Natalia and Sophia, confirming both my independence and my professional skill. As Teresa spoke, I studied Mauricio. The same man who had laughed while signing the divorce papers an hour earlier was now frozen, broken. From the back of the courtroom, Vanessa quietly stood and walked out without a word. The judge took 30 minutes to review everything. When she returned, her verdict was clear. Based on the evidence and the prenuptial agreement, the court rules that Alejandra Guzman Digital Solutions and its investment portfolio remain the separate property of Mrs. Guzman. Mauricio let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half protest. Furthermore, the judge continued, given Mr. Santos's lack of transparency regarding marital assets, the division of remaining property will be more favorable to Mrs. Guzman. The rest was a flood of legal terms I barely heard. The essentials were clear. I kept my company, my investments, and my new home. The apartment would be sold, and the money divided according to the court's formula. As I walked out, Mauricio rushed toward me, his lawyer trying to hold him back. You planned all of this, he hissed between clenched teeth, humiliated and furious. You've been waiting for years to destroy me. I looked him straight in the eyes, without hate and without fear. No, Mauricio. While you were destroying what we had, I was building something for myself. That's the difference between you and me. Teresa took my arm, and together we left him behind, alone in that empty courtroom where his arrogance had crumbled into dust. Leaving that place didn't feel like a victory. It felt like freedom. I could finally feel the weight of years of lies lifting off my shoulders, his lies and the ones I had to tell myself just to survive. Outside, Mauricio tried to stop me again. This time, he wasn't hostile. His tone was almost awkwardly friendly. Alejandra, we should talk. I think I underestimated you. Maybe we rushed things. We could be a powerful couple. I almost laughed. What grotesque honesty. Now that he knew about my wealth, suddenly he was interested again. There's nothing to discuss, Mauricio. The judge already decided. I still care about you, he insisted. What you built, we could do it together. Teresa cut him off coldly. From now on, all communication will be strictly through the lawyers. That night, I had dinner with Sophia, Natalia, and Teresa at a quiet restaurant overlooking the lake. We ordered champagne, not to celebrate Mauricio's defeat, but to toast new beginnings. To Alejandra, Natalia said, raising her glass, who built an empire while a fool looked the other way. A week later, I moved into my new penthouse, chosen by me, decorated by me. Big windows opened onto the wide sky, and the rooms felt warm and alive, nothing like the cold luxury I once shared with Mauricio. With the divorce finalized, I finally stepped into the world with my company. I expanded the offices, hired a team who shared my vision, helping real businesses truly connect with their customers. Within a year, we had clients across the country and had begun expanding internationally. I appointed Sophia as Chief Operations Officer. Her gift for management perfectly balanced my strategic and creative side. I also reconnected with my family, people Mauricio had pushed me away from, criticizing their manners, their traditions. Now I spent Christmas in Guadalajara, cooking with my mom, playing with my nephews, remembering who I really was. "We always knew you were extraordinary," my mom told me. "We just worried you might forget it." Even though things were going well professionally, emotionally, it wasn't always easy. Some mornings I woke up angry for having let myself be minimized so much. Other times I wondered how I didn't see the signs earlier. I started therapy. Dr. Ramos, a specialist in manipulative relationships, helped me understand that even strong people can fall into emotional traps. "Healing isn't a straight line," she reminded me. "Some days you'll feel powerful, other days broken. Both feelings are valid." 6 months after the divorce, I created the Financial Freedom Foundation for Women. We help women coming out of abusive relationships gain economic independence, scholarships, mentorship, and practical workshops on money and entrepreneurship. My story started to be shared at women's business forums. I would always say, financial independence is not just about money. It's about having the freedom to make your own decisions, not out of fear, not out of need. A year after the divorce ruling, I ran into Mauricio at a gala. He was with a new partner, not Vanessa. He greeted me with a soft tone. "You look good, Alejandra. I heard your company is doing incredible things." "That's right," I answered simply. After an awkward pause, he admitted, "I never saw your potential. I was so focused on shaping you that I never realized who you really were." I looked at him and felt no hate, no love, just distant compassion for someone who measured human worth with such a poor scale. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Mauricio." That night, back home, I reflected on everything. What once felt like a final humiliation, his betrayal, his contempt, had actually been the spark that saved me. He tried to throw me away, and that forced me to find myself again. I started dating again, but this time with healthier boundaries. I no longer needed to fit in. Whoever was with me would have to love me as I am, with my successes and also with my scars. My life isn't perfect, no life is, but it's mine, and that changes everything. My wealth keeps growing, but more importantly, so does my purpose. And if you're reading this, feeling underestimated, maybe the ending you fear so much is just the disguised beginning you actually need. Your worth doesn't depend on the eyes of someone who failed to see it. At some point, someone underestimated you, and you proved them wrong. Share it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, like it, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember their true value. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you straight to what you really need. Life kept moving forward, but this time, I was the one steering it. My company became more than just a business, it was a movement. Every project, every workshop, every woman who walked through our doors reminded me why I had survived everything I did. One day, at an event in Mexico City, a young woman came up to me in tears. She had left a controlling marriage with nothing but her children and a dream. She told me that one of our scholarships allowed her to start her own bakery. Now she employed 5 other women who had gone through the same struggles. "You didn't just change my life," she whispered. "You changed the lives of my children too." In that moment, I understood. Mauricio had tried to break me, but in doing so, he had unknowingly given me the fire to build something unshakable. His betrayal was not my ending, it was my beginning. Years later, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, looking out at the city lights. I no longer thought of him with anger, or even with pity. He was simply a chapter in a book I had already finished. What mattered now was the future, the lives I could touch, the freedom I had created, the love I had learned to give myself. I realized that true wealth was not measured in money or assets, but in peace of mind, in the ability to choose your path, in surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your light instead of trying to dim it. So, if you're listening to my story and you feel trapped, small, or invisible, remember this. Sometimes life takes away what you think you can't live without, only to show you that you are always stronger than you imagined. I lost a husband, but I found myself. I lost a false love, but I built the legacy. And today, I don't just survive, I thrive. Because the greatest victory is not proving someone wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were right all along.